Imagine you were forced to marry into a family that everyone in town whispered was cursed. Imagine standing in the snow at midnight, watching your future in-laws lower a coffin into an old brick well, and being told that the only way to survive was to obey every rule, without question. In the winter of 1972, Evelyn Carter, just 19, found herself standing on the front steps of the Winters estate, a sprawling, decaying farmhouse outside Harlow, Maine. They called it the house at the end of Hollow Creek Road, and for 100 years, nobody stayed there long. Not because of the rotting beams or the collapsing roof, but because everyone who moved in seemed to vanish, one by one. Evelyn had grown up poor in a trailer park near Bangor. Her mother had died when she was 5, and her alcoholic father never forgave her for surviving. When Mr. Winters, the richest man in Harlow, sent a formal proposal, her father didn't hesitate to sign her over like she was livestock. It was said that Benjamin Winters, the family's only son, had been sick for years. No woman he married lived long enough to give him an heir. The locals called the Winters place cursed ground. But Evelyn didn't have a choice. When she arrived, the sky was swollen with snow clouds. 7 men in black coats carried a polished oak coffin across the yard toward a brick well that sat behind the house. Beside it, Benjamin's mother, Clara Winters, a severe woman with thin lips, stood with a silver lantern. Evelyn clutched her threadbare suitcase and tried not to tremble. Clara turned to her, voice cold as the wind. "If you are to be a Winters bride, you will honor the traditions. You will never look inside the well. You will never question the past. And you will never, ever refuse your husband." I had tried to tell myself it was just superstition, just the fear that old families breed when they wall themselves away. But when I looked into Mrs. Winters' eyes, I knew she believed every word. The coffin slid into the dark mouth of the well with a hollow thud. No one explained whose body it was. No one looked at Evelyn. The wind carried a smell she couldn't name, sweet and rotting all at once. As the lid disappeared, Clara Winters whispered something under her breath. For a moment, Evelyn thought she saw a shape down there, pale as milk, moving in the dark. The men replaced the old wooden lid. They hammered iron nails along the edge. And Evelyn knew she would never be allowed to leave this place without permission. That evening, she was shown to a bedroom on the 2nd floor, directly facing the well. The walls were covered in old, yellowed wallpaper. A single oil lamp cast shadows that seemed to breathe. Evelyn set her suitcase on the floor and sank onto the bed. The mattress smelled of mildew and something else, something that made her skin crawl. As she sat there, she heard it. A low, wet whispering from outside the window. She tried to tell herself it was the wind, but the words came again. "Evelyn, come down and see." She ran to the door and found it locked from the outside. At dawn, Clara Winters unlocked the door without a word. Evelyn stumbled into the hall, her hands shaking. She thought of running. But where would she go? In the snow, in a county where everyone knew she was now a Winters bride. She thought of the well, and the promise she'd been forced to make. That was the first night she realized she wasn't just fighting for her freedom. She might be fighting for her life. The second morning, Evelyn stood in the kitchen while Mrs. Clara Winters poured her a cup of bitter black tea. Neither of them spoke. The silence was thick enough to choke her. Then the old woman finally said, "You will serve breakfast upstairs. My son is waiting." Her stomach turned. She'd heard so many rumors that Benjamin Winters hadn't stood up in 3 years, that he didn't speak, that no doctor could name what was wrong. Evelyn carried the tray carefully up the staircase, each creak of the steps echoing like a warning. She stopped in front of a heavy door with a brass handle shaped like a coiled snake. She took a deep breath and knocked. No answer. She turned the knob and stepped inside. The curtains were drawn tight. A single candle flickered on the mantel. In the chair by the window sat Benjamin Winters, or what was left of him. His skin was so pale it almost shone. His eyes were open but unfocused, staring straight ahead. He wore a black dressing gown. His hands lay motionless on the armrests. Evelyn swallowed her fear and set the tray on the table. "Mr. Winters, I've brought your breakfast." No reply. Not even a blink. Slowly, she moved closer. She tried to remind herself he was just a man, just sick, just... A sudden rasp of breath cut through the silence. His eyes shifted, locking onto hers, and for a heartbeat, she thought she saw recognition, or something like hunger. He whispered, so softly she almost missed it. "Don't look in the well." Her hands began to tremble. "What's in the well?" His mouth moved, but no sound came. Only a thin trickle of dark liquid, like ink, spilled down his chin. Evelyn backed away. When she reached the threshold, he whispered again, "It's waiting." She fled down the hall, nearly dropping the empty teacup. Clara was waiting at the bottom of the stairs. Her voice was sharp. "Did he speak to you?" Evelyn hesitated. He said not to look in the well." Clara's expression didn't change, but her knuckles whitened on the back of a chair. "You will forget whatever nonsense he told you. My son is unwell. He hasn't known what he's saying for years." Evelyn tried to nod, but in her heart, she knew Benjamin had been more lucid than he seemed. That night, Evelyn couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, listening to the house breathe. Wood groaned, pipes gurgled, and somewhere below her window, something shifted in the snow. Finally, she rose and pulled on her shawl. She couldn't explain why, only that she felt drawn to the yard. She crept down the back staircase and slipped out into the freezing night. The well sat in its circle of brick, crowned with frost. Her breath smoked in the air. She approached slowly, feeling her heart hammer against her ribs. On the rim of the well, something glistened. She bent closer and saw a line of wet footprints. Bare, small. They led from the lip of the well to the cellar door. This can't be happening. Suddenly, a voice spoke from the darkness behind her. "Looking for something?" She spun around. A man stood there, young, no more than 30, with a lantern in one hand and a revolver at his hip. "Name's Jonah Blake," he said evenly. "I work for the sheriff. Folks in town asked me to keep an eye on this place. Too many disappearances." Evelyn clutched her shawl tighter. "You don't understand. There's something in the well." Jonah's face was grave. "Ma'am, I believe you. But if you want to survive, You need to leave. Tonight. She shook her head, fighting tears. I can't. They locked me in, and my husband? He's still alive. Jonah raised the lantern, his eyes searching hers. Then God help us both. Before she could answer, a dull scraping began behind the cellar door. Slow, deliberate, as if someone or something was dragging itself up the steps. The footprints on the snow glistened, fresh again. Evelyn felt her legs go weak. She realized the Winters house wasn't cursed because it was old. It was cursed because no one who came here ever truly left. Jonah gripped the lantern tighter, the golden light shivering across the snow. Stay behind me, he murmured. Evelyn swallowed her fear and nodded. Together, they stepped toward the cellar door. The scraping had stopped, but she could feel it. Whatever waited on the other side, listening. Jonah raised his boot and kicked the latch. The door creaked open, releasing a gust of air that smelled of old earth and something fouler. Evelyn clutched his coat sleeve as he lifted the lantern and stepped into the darkness. The steps descended steeply, slick with moisture. Along the walls hung rusted hooks, each draped in tattered cloth. At the bottom, the lantern's glow revealed a low stone archway, beyond which stretched a long corridor. Jonah glanced back, voice low. Have you ever been down here? Evelyn shook her head, shivering. Mrs. Winters said the cellar was unsafe. Jonah didn't answer. He lifted the lantern higher. The corridor was lined with shelves, rows and rows of glass jars. At first, she thought they were filled with brine. Then she saw what floated inside tiny pale shapes. Hands curled in fists no larger than walnuts. Faces no longer human. Mouths frozen in silent screams. Evelyn clapped both hands over her mouth to keep from retching. Jonah's jaw clenched. Dear God. Each jar bore a yellowed label, written in the same spidery script. William, January 1902. Lydia, March 1904. Samuel Batematier, September 1906. And hundreds more. What is this place? Jonah turned to her, eyes dark. It's a ledger of the dead. He moved further down the shelves, scanning the labels. These are the children that disappeared from Willow Creek over the last century. All this time, everyone thought they were accidents or runaways. Evelyn felt her vision blur. You think the Winters family did this? Jonah's mouth tightened. I think it's worse than that. He set the lantern on a crate and pointed to a far corner, where a door stood ajar. Beyond it, a dim red glow pulsed against the floor. Stay here. She caught his sleeve, desperation in her voice. Don't leave me. For a moment, Jonah hesitated. Then he pulled the revolver from his belt, checked the cylinder, and pressed it into her hands. If anything comes through that door, you don't hesitate. Jonah pushed the door open fully and stepped inside. The walls were lined with faded tapestries. A crude altar squatted in the center, built from old stones. Candles flickered along the edges, their wax dripping into bowls. And on the altar, wrapped in black velvet, lay an open ledger. Jonah approached slowly. The writing was nearly illegible, but one phrase repeated over and over. The debt must be paid. As he reached for the book, the air in the room shifted, like the whole house had taken a breath. A voice rose behind him, brittle as dead leaves. You shouldn't be here. He turned, heart hammering. Mrs. Clara Winters stood in the doorway. Her face was gray, her eyes sunk deep into her skull. But her voice was cold and certain. "You have no idea what you are meddling with." Jonah leveled the lantern toward her. "I know you've murdered children. And I know your son is next." Her thin lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Benjamin was chosen, just as I was, just as my mother was. The well feeds and the well grants." "Grants what?" he demanded. Clara's gaze bored into him. "Life, prosperity, the power to never be forgotten." She lifted one hand and pointed past him, toward the ledger. "It keeps record of the bargains. You think you can break a covenant sealed in blood?" Jonah took a slow step back. "Watch me." Evelyn crouched by the lantern, hands locked around the revolver. Every creak of the house above felt like it was aimed straight at her heart. Then she heard it. A soft thump behind her. She turned. A small shape was crawling across the floor. Pale limbs, hollow eyes. A child, or what was left of one. Its mouth opened, and a whisper came out, dry and echoing. "Come, come to the well." Evelyn's screams shattered the silence. Jonah burst back through the doorway, the ledger clutched to his chest. He saw the child thing reaching for Evelyn, and fired. The shot boomed in the cellar, and the creature dissolved into smoke. Evelyn collapsed against him, sobbing. Jonah pulled her close. "We're getting out, right now." But as they turned for the stairs, the walls themselves began to groan. And from the corridor, dozens of voices rose in unison. The debt must be paid. The cellars shuddered as if something colossal was shifted under the foundations. Dust cascaded from the beams. Jonah dragged Evelyn up the steps, the ledger clutched under his arm. "Move! Don't look back!" She stumbled, her legs numb, but somehow kept climbing. At the top, the cellar door slammed shut with a force that rattled the hinges. Jonah threw his shoulder against it once, twice. On the third strike, it flew open into the kitchen. The lantern's light flickered wildly across the walls. Every surface was covered in black handprints, small, child-sized smudges trailing up toward the ceiling. Evelyn's voice cracked. "Jonah, what are those?" He didn't answer. From the far end of the hall, a soft chanting began, a chorus of whispers, voices layered over each other in a rising, echoing plea. "The debt must be paid." Jonah grabbed her wrist, hauling her toward the front door. But before they reached it, the shadows along the floor thickened, pooling into a shape. It rose, a figure tall and thin, wearing a mask of rawhide stitched into a blank face. Its voice was a hollow moan. "Return what was promised. You will not have her." The figure's head tilted, as if studying him. "Then you will take her place." Evelyn felt her throat close, a memory surfacing, her mother's stories about the well of shadows, how it demanded sacrifice. Her voice trembled. "Jonah, this is my fault." He shook his head. "No, it's theirs." He stepped forward, holding the ledger out like a shield. "You want this? The record of every life you've stolen? Take it." The figure cocked its head again, then it stretched out both hands, empty, waiting. Jonah took another step. Evelyn grabbed his arm. "Don't!" But he met her gaze, his voice softer. "If I burn this book, I think it breaks whatever binds them, and maybe frees Benjamin. Evelyn's eyes widened. And if you're wrong? Jonah looked at the child-sized handprints creeping up the walls. Then it was always going to end like this. He turned to the figure, voice loud. You feed on fear, on memory. You've taken enough. Slowly he lowered the ledger into the lantern's flame. The dry pages ignited with a roar. So hot, the air itself seemed to blister. The figure screamed, a howl that rattled every window in the farmhouse. The black stains on the walls began to writhe, melting away like tar. Evelyn shielded her eyes. Jonah, look! From the staircase, a smaller shape was emerging. Benjamin. He was pale, trembling, but alive. Evelyn ran to him, wrapping her arms around his thin shoulders. You're safe. You're safe. But Jonah stood frozen, watching the flames consume the ledger. The masked figure flailed, dissolving into smoke that billowed across the floor. And through that smoke, dozens of faces flickered. Children's faces, hollow-eyed, drifting upward into the rafters as if carried by a wind no one else could feel. One by one, they vanished. The chanting died. The house fell silent. When the first pale light of morning reached the porch, the front door creaked open by itself. The cold air poured in, clearing the last of the smoke. Evelyn guided Benjamin into the yard. He squinted against the sunrise, his voice hoarse. It's over? Jonah joined them, his face streaked with soot. Yes, I think it is. He looked back at the farmhouse. The windows were black with soot. The roof sagged as if something had exhaled its final breath. Evelyn took his hand. You saved him. Jonah's jaw clenched. We saved him. They stood together in the frosty grass, watching as the house finally, peacefully, settled into silence. Weeks later, the county sealed the property. Locals called it cursed. No one moved in again. Evelyn moved Benjamin into her small apartment in town. He never spoke about the cellar, never asked for his mother. Sometimes, late at night, Evelyn would catch him standing by the window, watching the trees sway in the darkness. One evening, she sat beside him and whispered, You don't ever have to go back. He didn't answer, but he took her hand, and in that moment, she knew the truth. Some debts are too old to ever be repaid. Some ghosts never leave. But even in the darkest places, love can still be the thing that carries you out. Before you dismiss this as just another ghost story, remember, grief is patient. It will wear any face to keep you from letting go. Sometimes the bravest thing isn't holding on. It's choosing to walk away.